Welcome wherever you are in the world, joining us for Page Builder Summit number 8. It's Wednesday and we have a live session today with Robert Abella from Melapress. How are you doing, Robert?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the invite, Nathan. How are you?
You're so welcome. So Robert is joining us from Melapress, and he's going to be giving a presentation entitled Simple Security Wins, How to Protect Your WordPress Users' Accounts Using Free Plugins. I would just like to point out at this moment, the grateful thanks that we, the Page Builder Summit organizers, have, because Melapress have stepped up to become one of our partner sponsors during this event, and I'm so really grateful for that, for one thing. The other thing to mention, a little bit of housekeeping, this is being distributed to various different platforms, but we will be keeping an eye on the comments. As Robert is going through his presentation, please write down any questions or commentary that you have. Just pop it in as a comment wherever you are watching this, and we will scoop them up. And then at the end, we will provide enough time for Robert to answer those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Robert. And yeah, thank you, Robert, for joining us today.
You're welcome. Happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Nathan. As Nathan said, today's presentation is about how to protect your WordPress user accounts using free plugins, which kind of like it's fitting. I was just an hour ago. We're just on the networking event of the summit as well. And it's one thing we're actually discussing, like, because not every user usually is technical into security. So there's that kind of like gap that users have when it comes to security. So it's good to also somehow educate users about these things. So yeah, let's get started. Let's look first, like, what are the most common causes of hacked websites? If you look at the WordPress security reports released during the last few years, including the last one, which was released a few weeks or months ago, which was a joint report between PageSec and Sucuri, the most common causes of hacked WordPress websites are still compromised accounts, which could be a variety of admin, editor, or any other accounts, and also outdated software, basically vulnerabilities in plugins, people running old software which is still vulnerable, and because of that, they get hacked. Now, of course, in this presentation, we're going to focus on the user accounts. What are the most common, like, how do user accounts get compromised? The most common causes are weak passwords, shared passwords. For example, using the same passwords for multiple services. It's very common. For example, use the same username and password for a number of websites, maybe an online service and stuff like that. And it is very dangerous because if one of those services is hacked and your credentials are leaked, then of course your other services are also at risk because you are using the same username and password. Also, users sharing passwords is very common, unfortunately. Users working within the same business or sharing credentials on email, for example, in clear text, that is also leads to leaked credentials. There are also lack of controls and check on accounts. For example, simple things that can be achieved on WordPress, like no throttling of login attempts, no policies to limit logins, for example, no policies to enforce strong passwords. And there's no hardening, like just relying on username and password. There are a lot of methods nowadays, like 2FA, passkeys, and other multi-factor authentication processes, which, even though they are becoming common, many WordPress websites are still not using them. And there's also, which is kind of like also what we're talking about, lack of awareness and training. Not all users are technical, so yes, many end up becoming victims of phishing attacks, use of insecure Wi-Fi networks, use public computers, accessing accounts on others' computers, and similar stuff. So yeah, so user account security is very important when it comes also to website security, because the security of your website is as strong as the weakest link. So you can have the strongest firewall, but if you can have the strongest firewall, you can implement any policies you want, but if one user has a weak password and those credentials are exposed, that is how good the security of your website is. Why are user accounts still like compromised? Still very common problem. First of all, they are a prime target for attackers because they are very easy easy to compromise. Basically, attackers take advantage of weak security hygiene, of weak security best practices. Once you achieve, for example, you can exploit a vulnerability, which takes much more work. However, nowadays it's much easier to if someone is using weak passwords or some credentials are exposed, once you achieve access to that account, it opens a lot of possibilities. So and also I think the second problem is we focus a lot in general. If you have your own website and you try to look for information about WordPress security, you will find a lot of focus and a lot of literature, articles on how to harden WordPress, on what the website administrator should do, how to harden WordPress, how to harden the web server on which your website is running, the infrastructure and setup around it, which is all good and should be done. However, we tend to put more focus on the security of the website and not user accounts. We need to help users keep their accounts secure, educating them, automating processes, and you don't need any expensive tools. This is a top-down approach, so of course it needs to start with you by practicing what you preach and apply policies. And do not assume that all the users are technical. Actually, it would be safer to assume that many website users are non-technical. They are not well informed when it comes to security, so we need to help them. And it's, in all fairness, it's not their responsibility to keep your website secure. It's your responsibility. So, but the good thing is that we can achieve user account security with no expensive tools or expensive software. And as we're going to see, this can be done with free plugins. By the way, this applies to, it's WordPress specific, but it applies to any size of website. It could be a business with large teams, e-commerce stores with multiple users, but also it applies, for example, for agencies, and we're talking about their own team, but also the clients. It will also be like a simple website where there are just two users, maybe the website owner and developer. Still, like what we're going to see, it applies for all these for any website of any size, basically. Let's start with the basics before we dive into WordPress. Let's tackle some basics, of course. Users need to keep their software up to date. This is very important security best practice. This doesn't apply just to WordPress. This applies to everything. Whatever you're using online, laptops, mobile phones, tablets, it has to be up to date. And if you have a team, it's your responsibility to keep the team's hardware updated. I mean, nowadays, if you're operating on a network, there are many tools which you can use to enforce policies. Or if, for example, you have a remote team, it's very easy to configure some policies and have the computer ready configured for them. Also, it's very important, if you're not sure, like whenever there are updates, there is, I don't know, everyone is using Mac OS or Windows or whatever. If there are updates available, drop your users an email like, hey, there are updates, click here, do this, so they will update their computers just in case it's not automatically configured. But it's up to you to remind the users. The second one is backups. As we were talking earlier during the session, like backups shouldn't be used as a security resource. It's more like for other things, but still, it's always good to have some backups. Backups are important, like what's important, of course, test your backups. Make sure that backups can be restored. Backups shouldn't be a resource to fix a hacked issue or lost data, but you can always use them at least to start from somewhere. And thanks today, these things are much easier. Everything, especially like many people, many companies, they have remote employees, and everything is on the cloud. So when it comes to backup, centralization of data and managing that data, it has become much easier. Of course, keep the users always notified and tell them like what they need to do. Now, let's jump into WordPress. These rules apply to everything, by the way, not just WordPress, but be it an operating system, the web server itself, everything. However, let's focus a bit on WordPress. So the first step when it comes to user account security, like let's start with the most basic, like how do users log in, basically? And the first thing, of course, the most basic type of authentication is using a username and password. I think one thing we should start right away, like, yeah, we're saying like users should use strong passwords. However, lower your expectations. Instead of do not try to convince users to use strong passwords, because they won't. It's a very difficult process. So it's up to you to give them the available solutions, set up the correct systems in place to automate as much as you can. So, for example, you can use one of the free plugins is a plugin we develop, Melapress Login Security. It's completely free. You can use it to configure policies to require users to use strong passwords. But just enforcing passwords is not enough. You need to help users comply with it. So the second recommendation is use a password manager. Basically, with password managers, there are a lot of advantages. First of all, users only have to remember one password, not a big number of passwords. By the way, there are free ones which can be installed on your as desktop software, but there are also online ones. I personally, even at work, we use online ones because it's easier to share the same database between different devices. And also, like the advantage about password managers, they have automated password generators. So basically, what you are doing here is like you're not just enforcing users to use strong passwords, you are actually creating this framework, you're creating these policies on your website to enforce strong passwords, but at the same time, you are giving the user a password manager. So the password manager takes care of automatically generating a strong password. So you are automating the system for the user without the user having to be involved. So you are reducing the friction for the user. And this is how it should be. Don't expect your users to use strong because it is very difficult. So help them create the policies, give them the tools to automatically generate passwords, to save the passwords and stuff like that. And they just have basically to overview the process. They don't have to be involved or come up with anything complex themselves. The second one is, of course, deploy 2FA, two-factor authentication. This WP2FA is also a free plugin developed by us. So basically, when you implement 2FA, what it is, for those who don't know, when you try to log in, you have to log in with a username, password, and something else. And the something else, usually it's a one-time code from a mobile app, for example, or over email. So 2FA is good because even if the credentials are leaked for some reason, attackers who have your credentials cannot access your account because they don't have the something else, the second factor that you have to provide. Either it's a one-time code via email or stuff, or via mobile app. Is a plugin. There are a lot of different plugins. In our case, like in this case, we recommend WP2FA because we develop it ourselves. It's very easy to use. There are no complications. Everything is wizard driven. And you can, for example, configure policies to require users to configure 2FA. You can give users grace periods, and in the there also in the future will be in the very next few months will be also implementing passkeys. So yeah, it's very easy. What's important, by the way, is whenever you are the same with passwords, the same with 2FA. Whenever you are implementing something new, explain it to the users. Don't just go up to the users like, hey, you have to enforce things, and they just try to log in the day after and they see some prompt. Because these type of when you enforce these type of things, this is when you start getting pushback, and this is when users start complaining like, oh, it's slowing me down, I cannot do this, I am going to be locked out. It's very important to work with users and explain to them, like, even if they are not technical people, they don't have to be technical. Just explain like, this will help us keep the website a bit more secure. This is how you can automate it. This is how you can make it easier and stuff like that. Because most of the time, with just a bit of communication, you'd be surprised how far users are willing to help you keep your website secure. If you are worried about 2FA, I know like a lot of website owners have a lot of concerns about users getting locked out because they're using 2FA because they forgot their mobile phone or the app is not whatever. Like you cannot generate the one-time code. There are a lot of methods. We call them backup methods. So, for example, with the free edition of W2FA, you can create what we call backup codes. So when you try to log in, you usually get the one-time code from the mobile app. But if for some reason, your mobile is not accessible, you have a list. You should be prepared up front, of course, when configuring 2FA. You have a list of 10 one-time codes, print it or save it in a text file somewhere, and you can use one of those codes to log in. So which I wouldn't worry much about users getting logged out. There are a lot of different methods how you can recover from these things. So yeah, basically with strong passwords and 2FA, you are already pretty much set. I mean, there are a few other things you can do, but there's much more things you can do. But like for the average website, the average user, let's put it this way, if they start with strong passwords and 2FA, that's already like a very good step ahead. There are a few other things which you can do. For example, you can do all of these with the free plugins I've mentioned. You can limit login failed attempts. So basically, when there are too many failed login attempts on a user within a certain time, that user account is locked. First, I would recommend like locking the user account. Many people try to, for example, block the IP address, creating these failed logins. It's a bit of a problem because when you try to block an IP address, it becomes a bit of a cat and mouse game, because nowadays it's very easy to spoof IP addresses. So it can become an endless game trying to block an IP address. So it's easier to lock the user account. So at least even if that user account is, if there's a dictionary text still running on that user account, now the user account is locked. And even if they get the password, the attacker won't be able to log in. You can also, for example, depending on how secure the website needs to be, you can deactivate public password resets. As you know, you can, with WordPress, you have an option to reset password, for example, and you can reset password by receiving an email. You can also deactivate that and restrict password resets just for the admins, so the admins can do it for you. It's very important, by the way, when you are working with third parties, you have a developer helping you or a blogger, provide temporary logins. Don't share passwords, don't share things online unless they have to log in long term. If it's just one-off thing or a few times, provide temporary logins, which are great. Basically, you don't have to share your passwords. You can also control, for example, how many times they can log in, how many times a link is used and stuff like that. And just if you have an internal team, the backend of your login page, because of course, if you have an e-commerce store or a membership website, you have the front end where the users log in, like the customer portal, let's put it this way, but you also have the backend, the login page where the administrator of your WordPress website logs in. That one you can also change the login IP address, change the login page URL. By the way, it's not 100% proof, but as always, when it comes to security, the more layers you can add on top of each other, the better it becomes. The more you can contain issues whenever should they happen. You can also add HTTP authentication, and you can also limit the IP addresses that can access your login page. Now, all of these might sound too much. So, like should these strict login policies be applied for all the users? No, I mean it really depends. It depends on a lot of things. Sorry for that. It really depends on a lot of things. Basically, first of all, if users have access to personal identifiable information, users, I don't like that, users who access payment information and stuff, typically we're talking about administrators, store owners, I would recommend go for strict policies always. The more secure they can be, the better. And then it depends. Like if you have an e-commerce solution, you could think about these free plugins. You can configure different policies for different user roles. So let's say for an administrator, you can really enforce strong passwords, enforce 2FA, limit certain IP addresses, for example, and stuff like that. But then, of course, for the users which are customers, I would say, if you want, you can configure 2FA, but definitely maybe strong, not as strong as it should be. Maybe if, for example, for the administrators, you configure the password to expire every 2 months or every month. For the user, make it every 6 months, for example, for the customers, because especially if they don't have, and when they log in, they don't access any particular sensitive data, it's fine. I mean, of course, the more you can enforce, the more your users can comply, and the more they can do, the better. But yeah, you have to also be reasonable as well. It's also, I'm not saying it's always good, because there are issues with things like privilege escalation, but there's a big difference between when a user admin account is hijacked or a subscriber user account is hijacked. It's never good, but it's still different. And as I said, the more layers you have, the more you can kind of like contain that attack. So once we've seen this section of the login, we jump into the next step. So like post-authentication. So the user has logged in, they've used a strong password, they've used 2FA ideally. Like what is next? You need to determine, basically, you need to help users keep their user account secure and encourage best practices. So basically, first we need to determine what can users access on the website, what information logged in users can see, which sections of the website they can access, what changes are they allowed to do on the website, what settings can they change on the website, or maybe what process can they trigger. Based on that, of course, you have to assign a user role. By the way, user roles, not everyone needs to have admin access. Wrong. It's very common. I know, I've seen it a lot of times. But yeah, wrong privileges can lead to issue with security, of course. You want to limit access, issue with compliance, especially if you have some sort of e-commerce website or have some websites where you have sensitive data, personal identified information, like you have to be compliant with a certain number of regulatory compliance requirements. And it also can lead to technical problems because people make mistakes. So always use what we call the principle of least privileges. This means that basically a user should have access to what they need. They shouldn't have access to more things, not even less. So the good thing about, like, with this, we can basically use a plugin, Melapress Role Editor, which is also a plugin from ours, which you can use to create custom roles and assign multiple roles to user. So basically, WordPress already has a number of built-in user roles. The problem with this, not a problem, because like for the average website, they're okay. But as the website grows, yeah, basically these roles are limited. If you have, for example, an e-commerce store or something like that, you need to have a number of custom roles. Maybe you have users who just update certain things on this store, and some users update some other things on the website. So you need to have custom roles. It's important when you are creating custom roles. It's always easier to give them access privilege to more things because it always works. However, it's more productive long term to spend a few more minutes or hours troubleshooting access the first few days, checking with the user if they can work, they can finish the task, because that pays off. Like, the user should have access to just what they need. It's very, in terms of security, also in terms of accountability, is the best thing. So yes, it might take some time. Not everyone should be an administrator. It might take some time to find out the right privileges every user needs, but it's the best way forward in terms of security, compliance, and also technical issues. For example, let's look at typical e-commerce store. You have part of the team which updates the product metadata, for example, stock quantity, dimensions of a product, prices. But you also have the marketing team which updates the products on pages SEO metadata. So these two users will be accessing same parts of the e-commerce store, but they have different access. You don't want, for example, it's not a question of trust, it's also a question of accountability, and people make mistakes. You don't want the marketing team, for example, by mistake updating something from the product. So you can use custom roles and configure different privileges with a plugin like Melapress Role Editor to specify what users with that role can access and what they cannot access. So this is very common. Another common scenario, agencies. There are agencies, like we've seen, especially as agencies grow, they don't always allow full access to their customer, even though the website owner, even though the website is owned by someone else, but the agency have SLAs, like they only allow the client, for example, to change specific theme settings, update the themes and plugins and stuff like that. But they want to limit them from installing new plugins, changing WordPress website settings and stuff like that. So you can create a role that is not an administrator, for example, but can still update plugins when there are updates available. So Now we've covered the basics, like we've covered the login process. So basically, we have secure passwords. And by the way, when we have secure passwords, as I said, automate for the user, help the users, help them by automating the process so they don't have to think of a complex password themselves. Add to FA. So even if just in case their account is hacked, it's always good to have an extra additional layer of security. They still, whenever you need to log in, you have to log in with a username, password, and the one-time code. By the way, for no one say like, because I know like some people have considered like, oh, each time I have to log in, I have to copy this one-time code. There are ways and methods and different ways. Like for example, you can send a link over email to the user and they just click the link. There are different ways. Or you can, for example, in the premium plugin, you can have what we call trusted device. So you just enter the one-time code and say, save this computer for the next 30 days or 60 days. So whenever you log in, you are not asked for the one-time code each time. You still have to enter just username and password. Use user roles. And when it comes to user roles, make sure you use the principle of least privileges. So yeah, we're pretty much covered. But there is always more you can do. And there is like one very important thing that we can do is the most important part, like educate the users about security best practices. This has become like really important, especially nowadays. Many businesses, especially in the WordPress ecosystem, our business is a remote business, and I know a lot of businesses which operate completely remotely. So security best practices have become really, really important because you have your own employees, your own team traveling. So it's very normal. You don't have, when you have a network, for example, when you are sitting in an office, you have direct access to these computers. So it's much easier, even at the way security works at network level, it's much easier to propagate some settings, to automate some tasks. You have kind of like more access to these computers. So it's easier to automate the security for the users, and they are exposed to much less things because they're working from the office. However, if you have some team members who are traveling every day, of course, they are exposed to much more. So educating the users is very important. Also, as a rule of thumb, it's much safer. You'll be much more secure if you assume that users don't have no exposure to security and have no awareness of security and what they need to do. Because when you have that certain mindset, then of course you're going to do much more for them and you're going to automate much more. And automation is important. So when it comes to educating users, first of all, of course, whenever you are adding new policies or changing something, especially when it comes to security and the operations, the way they log in or the way they do things, always advise users up front. If you fail to advise users up front, you're going to have pushback, and you don't want to do that because people will feel it's counterproductive, for example, something that you've added new, or they feel it's too difficult to complete some tasks. So it's very important. The most important is keep the users in the loop, keep them posted, explain how they, for example, if you implement 2FA, don't just say like, we've implemented 2FA, send them an email with instructions. Like the next time you're going to log in, you're going to see this wizard. You have to click here, you have to scan this QR code, install this app. So the next time you log in, you just have to enter your username and password and one-time code. And the reason why we are doing this is for security. So keep the user involved. And when they are involved, when they are advised upfront, they will comply. They will comply much more. On top of that one, of course, a short list of best practices. Educate the users about the risks of using public Wi-Fi and networks. Never use public computers. Of course, sometimes you have to use public Wi-Fi's. In that case, always use VPNs. Actually, not if you are on a public network. I prefer to say, just be safe and secure. Have your VPN network on. As long as you travel, if you leave your home office, make sure your VPN is always on. It's always safe. A safe assumption, your VPN should always be on. So basically, VPN, it encrypts the traffic between your computer and the destination VPN server. So even if you don't want it, but even in the case like someone is sharing some password over clear text email or something, at least, it cannot be captured on that Wi-Fi network. So this is very important. Credentials hygiene. Never share credentials. as in like never use the same credentials for different services. Also between teams, it's very common. For example, it's easier. Oh, like everyone uses the same username to log into the website. Like that's it. It has a lot of problems with that approach. First of all, of course, security, because you are sharing credentials. And typically, yeah, when someone joins, you send them the credentials over email, for example, which is very, very wrong, very bad. But it's also yeah, like in terms of accountability, it's really wrong. Like if you want to keep a log of what's happening on your e-commerce store, if everyone uses the same username and password, how do you know if someone made a mistake, for example, or something happened, and you need to find out like what happened to troubleshoot an issue? How will you know exactly who was that user? Because everyone is using the same user. So don't share the same credentials. I know there are exceptions. Sometimes you might need to share credentials. In the case you might need, for example, there are some services, I don't know, like social media management services where you have two marketing people posting occasionally, and they're like in such using the same service and same credentials. In that case, yes, share credentials over password manager. Many online password managers, for example, the good thing about online password managers is that you can have different vaults, and you can share vault. For example, in our team we have a vault. I have my own vault, but I also have a vault that we share with the marketing team. For example, a vault that I share with the development team. For example, the one with the development team, we have a lot of test websites and test cases and maybe some test licenses we use. Yeah, like in that case, of course, yeah, we use one credential for that service. But yeah, we don't share anything over email or stuff like that. We simply share it over a password manager. If you really have to, ideally you should never, but if you really have to share a password over the internet and you cannot use a password manager, it's not the best solution, but yeah, at least split the password and send it in using two different channels. So if you're sending a password to a friend, for example, send half of the password over email and the second half send it over WhatsApp or some other messaging software. So at least the password cannot be captured in, as a whole string. Yes, important. Teach users to recognize potential attacks. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. However, you can always maybe prepare a short document or prepare a short video and explain, like simple things like how do you recognize phishing attack? Always check the sender email URL, the email from whom the email is coming, the URL. Hover, especially on desktop, you can hover over the link before clicking on a link so you can see the link. And usually, yeah, if the link has a lot of strange characters or it's very long or it doesn't even make sense or it is a long URL, it's not a good sign. And yeah, when in doubt, when you're not sure, type the domain, or like for example, if it's the link is domain dash like a lot of the rest of the URL query strings and stuff, simply write the domain in a browser, see what happens. But yeah, ideally, if you're unsure, don't click, or at least speak to the website administrator. Something else, secure file handling. Do not open or download attachments from unknown users. I've heard this since the 90s, I think, but it still happens, unfortunately. Something like one way to avoid this from happening in your company with your team, you can implement a company policy, have a central repository. Every user can have their own directory, and you can have like a central directory for all the users, and never send files over email. Instead, for example, always upload a file to a drive and then send it to someone like, hey, you can download the file from here. So people know within your team that if they receive an email with an attachment, unless someone made a mistake and sent the attachment by mistake over email, that is not a legit email and they shouldn't open the file. So by creating this policy and sharing only URLs of files to download instead of attaching files to emails, basically users know that they shouldn't download and open files attached to emails. Very important, report incidents. It is very important. If you are suspicious, if you've seen something like, encourage users to report. But also to encourage users to report incidents, you need to make yourself or the administrators of the website or the team, whoever takes care of these things, easily accessible. Make sure, like, make it clear to the user, like, listen, this is the email where you contact this site admin, this is the phone number, etc. And encourage them. Like, anything suspicious, it's better to double check with the team rather than trying and breaking things yourself, you know. So it's very important. Encourage your team to report incidents. And repeat. Yeah, basically, you have to keep repeating the same message, keep reminding the users. Habits fade very fast, unfortunately, with everyone, not just non-technical users, even with technical users. Habits fade very fast. So yes, do send the occasional emails, send reminders, drop hints, you know, like mention things during meetings. If you spot something, highlight it right away, speak to the users. When there are updates, for example, always advise the user, like, hi, Microsoft or whatever, Apple release these updates. Please check your phone, check your tablet, check your laptop, click here, do this, like, add screenshots. Keep reminding the users, and explain to them and keep them posted. Don't just add new policies, don't just add new things on your website. Just advise, keep the users in the loop so they know, so you don't get backslash. And basically, yeah, that's about it. So it's all about, as I said, like, in summary, first we implement, if you look at the login process, password policies with free plugin like Melapress login security, and use password manager to encourage the use of complex passwords. It's all automated. Use 2FA, so it's an additional layer and it hardens the authentication process of your website. Auto updates. There are a lot of, as we've said, like, there are a lot of solutions for auto updates nowadays. Use user roles. So basically, not everyone needs to be an admin. Take your time, create custom roles, assign multiple roles to same user if need be, but yeah, use custom roles. And last but not least, very important, because habits fade very fast, educate the people, educate your team, educate everyone, and tell them what's happening and tell them why, and explain, like, how to recognize attacks and provide them with the right information. That was it. Thank you very much. As I think Nathan is going to. Okay, we've got the first question. What's your opinion on enforcing a new password every X days? There are theories that this would decrease security because people just choose easy passwords to remember. That's very correct. However, that's why I said should use password managers, because when you use password managers, the process of generating new complex passwords is automated. So you don't have to worry. Like, the more you automate of this process, you leave the user out of it. The user just has to remember one password, which is the password of the password manager. In that case, then this shouldn't be an issue. But yes, if you leave it up to the users, as I've said in one of my first slides, like, lower expectations, because they won't use difficult passwords. And it's understandable. It's difficult to come up with 30 to 40 different passwords, and every 30 days you have to come up with a new password again. Let's see if anyone has a question. Yeah, Nate, I don't really understand what passkeys are, where they're stored, but it feels like I should start using them as a replacement for username and passwords. Very good question, Nathan. Yes, passkeys basically are like, it's like a key, quite frankly. They're stored on your computer, on your there. You can have, like, different passkeys. If you have, for example, different browsers to access the same website, you're going to have, it depends how you configure, but you can have different passkeys. But basically, if you have a passkey for a website on this computer, for example, and then you try to access the website from your mobile, then you have to create a passkey there as well, because passkeys can be kind of like device dependent. However, if you use a password manager, which supports passkeys, then you can use the same passkeys. Passkeys basically is like passwordless authentication, but it is still more secure because it's something unique that is stored on your computer, or of course, if you use a password manager, it's stored on your password manager. But you don't have to enter username or password. And nowadays, the most Google, Facebook, and all these big services are encouraging the use of passkeys. Jamal, how can I make 2FA easy for non-technical clients? Yes, with, like, I think what we do with our plugin, it's never easy. I think first of all is to explain to the users what you're going to do, to the clients. But on top of that, yes, like if you're going to do it, choose a plugin that has some sort of wizards and clearly explain, like step by step, what you need to do. Like in all fairness, the process shouldn't be that difficult. Let's say you're going to use email to FA. I would go for app, but let's say you start with email to FA. The question is, once you log in, you're going to receive a code. Just copy that code, and when you ask for it, enter it. But yeah, it shouldn't be that difficult. If it's difficult for the users, maybe the solution is not good enough. We're not explaining it well enough to the user, or something like that. But it shouldn't be that difficult, especially if you use like the most simple solutions. Now, Aryan, how can I tell if a user account has been compromised? Very good question. That is more of an admin task. There are a lot of things which you can. First of all, there are things that you can do at website level. For example, a certain spike in an unusual spike in traffic. For example, traffic from certain countries where usually you don't get traffic from. If you want to start digging deep and see if it's a user account has been compromised, there are solutions like Activity Lock plugins. Like we have a plugin called WP Activity Lock. So there's also the free edition that you can use basically. And from the Activity Lock, you can see, for example, in the Activity Lock, you can see the IP address, when the user logged in, what that user is doing, etc. And by tracking and reading those logs and seeing maybe, I don't know, all of a sudden someone started logging in at different times than the usual times, or they're logging in from a total different IP, then of course that means 99% that user has been compromised. So by the way, activity locks on their own is not enough. When a website has been compromised, it's good too. Activity locks are good because of course you can tell something specific for users and what's happening specifically on WordPress, but you should look at the web server logs, the PHP error logs, because usually when accounts or websites are compromised, there's some malware injection or something similar. So usually that throws out of PHP errors because it's never like a polished process. So there's a whole forensic process which you can do to identify these things. But when it comes to just specifically users, yes, something like the activity lock will give you a lot of information and help you identify what's happening. I have another question. How can I protect my admin login page from bots? Good question. Bots nowadays, as we were talking during our network session earlier on, the internet is full of bots. So as such, you can, there are a few things. First of all, like you can change the URL because most bots usually just check for the default /WP admin. So by changing the URL, it's not bulletproof, but it's already like you're already at least removing any possibility of automated attacks. You can, if you are working always from the same place and you have a fixed IP address, you can limit, restrict the access to that page by IP address. You can also add HTTP authentication, which means before you actually access the WordPress login page, you are prompted for username and password, and you are authenticating against the web server. But this is, of course, you have to create, if you have multiple users, you have to create a username and password for each of those users on your web server rather than WordPress. So then first you authenticate against HTTP and then you authenticate on WordPress. So the best solution, I would say, the most practical, let's put it this way, if you don't have fixed IP addresses and stuff like that, is to change the WordPress login URL. That is the easiest one. And if you see attacks are increasing, I would say go for some sort of online web application firewall solution, because they can control, they have much better solutions, they have much more capacity to handle these type of attacks. Let's see. Felix, should I be worried about password reset links getting intercepted? It's a possibility. It doesn't happen often, but it is a possibility. Emails are sent Gmail to Gmail, if I'm not mistaken, they're not, but in general, email between SMTP servers, and they're sent in clear text. So technically speaking, if someone, especially like someone is sitting somewhere in between the SMTP servers communication, they can intercept it, yes. But the way things are now, it's becoming more and more difficult, but it is possible. I wouldn't worry much, as in like, or maybe what you can do is restrict password resets. and instead simply leave it for the administrators, and then the administrator can communicate with the user via other means and reset the password for them and send them the link via Slack or other messaging application. It's definitely much safer that way. Harper, how do I educate users without overwhelming them? Security jargon. Very good question, Harper. Yes, I think it's, first of all, you need to see, like, you kind of like what are the users doing? Like, do you need to enforce certain things? Yes or no? It's one of the slides. Like, in an ideal world, of course, everyone should have top security, but it really depends. If it's an administrator, it's one thing, but if it's a subscriber, it's a different thing. So they can have different policies for different users. However, like, one thing not to overwhelm them is, apart from this one, is like, do things step by step. Don't, like, one day people are just logging in with a username and password, and the day after they have to use strong passwords, they have 2FA, all of a sudden their user roles are restricted and stuff like that. I would say step by step, explain to them what's going to happen. Start with strong passwords, for example, automate, as we said, with password managers, continue with user roles, add 2FA, but do it step by step. Don't launch everything at one go, because you're going to have pushback, and because people will get overwhelmed. Ravi, is it okay to disable XML RPC completely for better security? Yes, I think by default, most security plugins, they disable by default. So I mean, unless you need it specifically for certain things, which nowadays I doubt still in use on WordPress specifically. No, it's fine to disable it. Yes, you can either use a security plugin, or I'm sure you can find a code snippet of code to disable it. Disable it yourself. I think no more.
Okay, that's all the questions we've got, Robert. I think that was splendid. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, that was great. The a real comprehensive dive into all of the bits and pieces, around WordPress users, login, 2FA, and all of those kind of things. I would just like to say, we mentioned it at the beginning, but I want to say it again. Robert's company, Melapress, has been crucial in putting this event on. And if you go to the URL, which is displayed on the screen at the moment, pagebuildersummit.com/Melapress, there's an opportunity to win things. And who doesn't like winning things? $100 Amazon voucher is up for grabs. There's another $50 Amazon voucher as well. And another prize, which is really nice, is a Melapress login security license as well. Now, I think you played it brilliantly in that presentation. You were very, very good at giving us all the information and kind of not really bigging up what you do over at Melapress. So I'm now giving you full license to go into massive advertise mode. Tell us what it is that you do over at Melapress. Tell us a little bit about the products that you've got. And we've got a few minutes to cover that.
Good. Thanks a lot, Nathan. So basically in the presentation, I only mentioned different plugins, because like everyone can use them. There's no cost and stuff like that, for free. In terms of what we do, we develop a number of security and user management plugins. Basically, our flagship product is WP Activity Log, which you can use to keep a log of what logged in users are doing on your website, who logged in, from where, if they installed a plugin, changed content and stuff like that. We have WP2FA, which is a 2FA plugin, which you can use to add two-factor authentication to your website, and other different types of multi-factor authentication. And we have Melapress Role Editor, which is our latest addition. We've launched it a few months ago, or weeks, I'm not sure. But so basically you can use it to create custom roles. All our plugins, we use a freemium model. So basically we have a free edition of the plugin. All the free plugins, for example, W2FA is a perfect case. It's a fully working 2FA solution, and quite frankly suitable for a lot of websites. In fact, I think the free edition it's nearing 8,000 active installations in just 2 years. So it's when the way we've built our business models, like even with activity logs, there are no limitations when it comes to logs. You have search. However, if you want to, for example, WP Activity Log, if you want to have like more than just logs and search, like instant email notifications, instant Slack notifications, reports, segregation of logs, and all these fancy, nice business stuff, then of course you need the premium edition. The same with 2FA. As I said, the 2FA plugin is the free edition works fine. It's a complete, full-blown 2FA solution. However, if you want to start kind of like making it easier for you in terms of automating more, like trusted machines, so instead of having to enter the code every time, you just trust the machine for 30 days, so you will not ask for 2FA code every day. Or for example, add other 2FA methods via SMS, or you simply receive an email and click on the link. You don't have to enter any codes.
Okay.
Yeah, when this type of business solutions, then of course they are the premium. But the free plugins, yeah, they're more than enough, like for many websites. And role editor, as I said, we've just released it a few months ago, so it's at the moment we have the free edition only. We are planning of having a premium, but as I said, similar to the other plugins, the aim is to have like a useful, fully functional free edition, and then we'll see if there are like some business features typically that business can benefit from. Of course, then we'll have the premium edition.
Nice. So I'm looking at the Melapress website at the moment. If you go to melapress.com, bravo on the website. You make it really obvious what it is that you have. And there they all are. Four things: WP activity log right there, WP2FA, there it is, Melapress login security, and a fourth one actually, capture for WP as well. So you've got like a capture solution as well.
Yes, I didn't mention it because like we focus mostly. In fact, I forgot to mention we have Melapress login security as well, which is a plugin you can use to configure configure password policies.
Okay.
And some login pages. You can change the login page URL. You can limit failed login attempts. Like these are all in the free edition. In the premium edition, we have some other features, of course, some more like business-like features. I didn't mention captcha because all the other plugins are security kind of thing. Captcha is kind of like it doesn't really fit in the whole thing. So we treat it's still a good plugin, but we treat it a bit differently. We market it in a different way. Kind of, it doesn't really fit in with the security. I mean, some people look at captcha as a security solution as well. For example, you can add captcha to the login page, for example, and stuff like that to really limit and throttle how many times someone can try to log in. But yes, it's treated a bit differently. And instead, in terms of main plugins, it will soon be replaced with the role editor plugin, which is still very new. So
still in a piece in the works. It was curious to me when I came from the Drupal space, and Drupal always had enormous capabilities in terms of roles built into the core CMS. And when I came to WordPress, I always found that curious that didn't exist. And so I'm glad that you are taking that on, because that's pretty cool. If you want to just granulate who can do what, and obviously from a security point of view, have access, you can update the cart, you can update the colors, you can update the text. It's really, really crucial. So one more time, melapress.com. You'll see everything there, and pagebuildersummit.com/Melapress if you want to take part and win one of the 3 fabulous prizes. Once more, just before we knock it on the head, I would like to draw attention to the fact that it was the kindness of Robert sponsoring us, giving us a partner sponsorship this year. It definitely makes events like this happen. So much appreciation from all the crew over on the Page Builder Summit. With that being said, Robert, Abella, thank you so much. Hopefully everybody got something out of that, and we will see you next time on the Page Builder Summit, I hope.
Thanks a lot, Nathan. Or I'll see you in Paz.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye.